All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's open forum. Today, we're going to go over the as-is contract as well as some other forms I have in the chat. Please feel free to put any other forms that you would like to see. We're going to maybe do the buyer brokerage agreement and the listing agreement. We'll go over those quickly unless you need more detail than that. But we're going to go over the as-is fairly thoroughly right now. And in the chat, please feel free to put in any kind of forms you like, and when we get done, we'll go through those and do as many as we have time to get to. So if you have any specific questions about any specific forms, that would be your chance to do that, and we'll go over that. All right, so let's go through the as-is. Good morning, everybody. Let's do it. All right, you've got the parties, you've got the sellers. Those are their names that are on the recorded documents. Of course, there's all kinds of things that issues you guys can have with probate and different things and deceased sellers and all that stuff. And those are obviously a whole different subject, but let's say we have a straightforward buyers and sellers here, and we'll do it that way. Sellers can be an LLC, buyers can be an LLC, doesn't matter, whatever it is, you represent them. One person will sign for an LLC. Okay, there is a managing member, they will sign for it. You don't specifically need to go through their documents. You can take their word for it then, but title is going to need to see the managing member signature. That's why they ask to see all the documents at the end of this thing, all of their agreements and how they work. So they'll need all the LLC documents. I can't remember what they are right now. Okay, street address. All that stuff will pull from the realist tax ID. About if it's something on the MLS, obviously you pull it straight from the listing, or you put in the address in and they'll pull it for your, you put in the property ID and they'll pull all this information for you. Personal items. As you guys know, washers and dryers are not listed on here. Everybody thinks they are. They are not listed on here. If you want the washer and dryer, you need to be specific here and write it in. You can see, I don't know if you guys can see you can see my auto ones I have already in here. If you want to do that kind of stuff, I was just doing an example on a previous training, but you can put all appliances, you can put something like that, but I like that because it covers everything. But washer and dryer is a very specific one. I always tell you guys, realtors are the number one purchasers of washers and dryers because it's miscommunication on contracts. What the MLS says means nothing. It is only what is in the contract that matters. So don't say, oh, I didn't write that in there, but in the MLS, it doesn't matter what the MLS said. The MLS is just an advertisement. You got to make sure that you protect your clients and have it on here. And a lot of times people change their mind. That's why when you're the listing agent, by the way, to go off track a little bit, when you're a listing agent, that's why these data entry sheets are so helpful. The seller signs off on I'm leaving the washer and dryer, or they don't, because a lot of times sellers try to change their mind later. The house they're buying doesn't have a nice washer and dryer. I really love the ones we have at home. Let's take those, honey. Well, guess what? You can't if you've agreed to sell them. So make sure you write it in here, washer and dryer. This one, from the buyer's agent, I always put none, unless it said something specifically. They ask that they want to take something doesn't convey. If they do say something doesn't convey, then you write it here. But if they don't, put none. So that's what I typically would do. Here I would do all appliances. There I would do none. Okay, if I'm expecting the washer and dryer or whatever. All right, purchase price, very straightforward. The amount to be held in escrow, if you're the listing agent, I'd like to see 2% here, but if you're the buyer's agent, try to get away with whatever you can. It does make a difference when it comes to any breach of the contract. Some amounts are worth fighting for and some aren't, because by the time you get to court, all the money's gone. And so a lot of times, that's why a lot of times you see splits and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into all that right now, but if you're the listing agent, get a decent amount here. It's worth bargaining for. Okay, this is typically this. A lot of times people leave this blank. If left blank, then 3 days, but it doesn't, you still have to check one or the other to do it right. So typically that's what you're going to want to see. I like to see all the blanks filled in. So go ahead and put 3. That is typical. This date is business days only, open business days only. So if it's a holiday, if you get a contract signed on a Friday, Saturday would be day 1 for the inspection, but Monday is day 1 for the deposit. Okay, so they have till Wednesday to get their deposit in. If you get it signed on Sunday, they still have till Wednesday, right? Because Monday's still day 1. But as far as the inspection goes, which we'll get to in a minute, the inspection starts, day 1 is tomorrow. If I get a contract today, day 1 is tomorrow. But for so I've got a contract signed today. Thursday would be day 1 for both inspection and deposit. Friday would be day 2 for both. Saturday would be day 3 for the inspection, but not the deposit. Okay, Monday is day 3 for the deposit. So if I get a contract signed today, Monday is when the escrow is due. All right. As far as the inspection goes, though, let's say it's 10 days. That would be Thursday. That would be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday again. Inspection will not run out until the following Monday. Inspections don't end on weekends, so they end on business days. But all days count. Calendar days count, but they can't end on a weekend. They have to end on a Monday. All right, or the next business day if it's a holiday or something. All right, so escrow agent name, address, phone number. Not seeing a lot of faxes anymore. I wouldn't worry too much about that, but everything else should be filled in. If you have the fax, go ahead and put it in there. Additional deposits are rarely done in residential real estate. They're very, in commercial, vacant land or commercial, they're much more common. A financing, dollar amount or percentage, whatever that is, you got that figured out. I like to use percentages because that's well, they're both typically on the thing, but the actual sales amount, that way you don't have to keep changing it when the sales amount changes, sales price changes. Balance to close, that'll work itself out. Time for acceptance, and it says here, does not, I've heard you guys say, but I don't know what they're going to have to bring to closing with everything. It doesn't count all that stuff. This is just basic thing. Nobody's going to hold anybody to this amount that's here if it changes. If your loan changes, you don't have to redo the whole contract and stuff. It's things change during the thing, and as long as no one complains at the time, then it's not a breach of contract. But don't worry about that. Don't worry about this beyond it's 90% of, or 10% of, depending on what your loan amount is. If it's 90% loan, then it's 10% of your purchase price. That's fine for this. Time for acceptance. Guys, if it's a out of country seller or something like that, give them a little bit of time. But typically, 24, 48 hours is good, as long as you're going to deliver this in a timely fashion. The problem with this a lot of time is I'll put tomorrow's date here, and then it will get, and you can even put this, you can pick a date. I just made up a date, and you can put 5 p.m. There you go. All right. You can do that kind of stuff. I don't know why I picked the date that's in the past, but you can do it by 5 p.m. Let's say let's make it tomorrow by 5 p.m. Now, if my buyer is on a flight right now to somewhere, and they're coming home from vacation and they don't have a whatever, and they're not going to sign this until tomorrow morning, then give them an extra day. Be reasonable about it. Obviously, you're trying to get the deal done. But you also have to give them a deadline, a reasonable deadline where your buyer can move on. The closing shall occur. Talk to your lender first. This is typically going to be 30 to 45 days out. Talk to your lender and see. Be careful boxing your client into a too early date. If you've got some lender that is somebody who's some of them will tell you they can close. Oh, I can close this in 20 days. Don't worry about it. There's always underwriting. There's always hiccups. There's always something. Give yourself a little bit of extra time. And you can put it on or before, right? You can put it on or before date. So extension of closing date, that's not anything, force majeure. Okay. Guys, when you're selling investment properties, if there is a tenant in place, you must check this. Otherwise, you have to get rid of the tenant before it closes. I have seen you guys not check these before. Not recently, thank goodness. But you guys have not checked these before, and then you've been, oh no, what am I going to do? The buyer says that the tenant has to be gone, and you didn't specify that on the contract. Always make sure this is done. Otherwise, it has to be broom swept and empty at closing. Okay, so if you have a tenant, you got to click this box. And when you're the listing agent, obviously for the buying agent, and there's a tenant, you're going to click this box. If you're the listing agent and they have not clicked this box, you have to click this box. You have to go back and have everybody initial it. You check it, have everybody initial it. Okay, you have to do that. Assignability. I get questions on this quite a bit. When you're the listing agent and somebody does this one, may assign and thereby be released from any further liability under this contract, that is typically going to be a flipper. Okay, they're going to flip your property. They're going to go out and market it and try to sell the contract, typically, because what they want to do is they want to be able to walk away at the end of this. The second one, may assign but not be released from liability under this contract. This is my favorite when I'm the buyer's agent. I like to do this because that way, you guys see this all the time. You have husband and wife, and the husband can't be on because he has a credit problem, but the wife can buy it in her name or whatever. You find out some of that stuff later through underwriting. They have to add mom on there for a guarantee. They have to do something like that. You want to be able to assign it, but not be released from liability on this contract. That is fair and whatever. I can assign it, but I still am responsible for it. Okay. That is not going to be somebody who's flipping it, because if I flip something to somebody and they don't close, and they're going to call me back and say, oh, you owe us money. No, that's not the way that works. So may assign but not be released from contract is fair, and it doesn't require the seller to approve anything you want to change to the buyer's line here. So sometimes a lender will require a change to a buyer's line. This will not require the seller to approve it. And as a seller, if I'm a listing agent and I get this, I don't mind that. May not assign this contract. That is fine too. You'll see that a lot. A lot of agents are trained to do that. That just means they have to get permission if they do want to change the buyer's line. If the guy, a lot of times you want to put it in an LLC, they want to do something like that, especially investment properties. They want to change it to an LLC. They want to do something like that later. Sometimes your buyer tells you that. That's where you want to do this may assign. And if you explain to a listing agent, they don't know if they're going to need their mom to sign for them or not, or they don't know if they're going to put it in their LLC or not. Usually the listing agent will be like, okay, we understand. Because they're not released from liability. Financing, cash transaction is obviously very easy. Financing contingency, contract is contingent upon. Usually the loan approval is 30 days. I think that's pretty reasonable. Normally loan approval is 30 days, closing is around 40 days. That's typical contract right now. If you want to change that, I do see people with 20 days here. I've seen people want to get it done faster, and usually the buyers are like, okay. And the lender will say, yeah, of course I can get you approval in 20 days. There's always going to be, there's almost always conditions with that approval. As you guys know, the conditions do not count. Those conditions are something that you're taking on as risk as a buyer, if there are conditions still after this 30 days. As a buyer's agent, I like to get the full 30 and move on from there. Whatever kind of loan we're approved for, whatever we've decided. Can you change the kind of loan? Yes, you absolutely can change. If you're going from conventional though, so if I get you to sign, if I'm the buyer's agent or the buyer, and I get you to get the seller to sign a contract that says conventional, and I want to switch to FHA, do I need the FHA rider at that point? Yes, FHA has restrictions that conventional does not have. A FHA offer and VA offer, as much as you may hate to hear it, and some people say, oh, it shouldn't make any difference to the seller. It does make a difference to the seller. There are certain restrictions that we have with FHA and VA. One of them is the appraisal. If I get an FHA appraisal and it's low, I'm stuck with an FHA appraisal for any other FHA deal I might take for 6 months. They will not reappraise for 6 months. My FHA, if I submit another FHA offer, they won't. Same with VA. But with conventional, I can get it reappraised every time. And as you guys know, you'll get appraised one time and it comes in low, and you get appraised the second time and it comes in 30,000 higher. I mean, it's different appraisals come in at different amounts. So that's one thing. I think the most important thing though is that, because if I take one FHA and I get a low appraisal, then I just won't take another FHA. That's fine. So I don't think that's that huge of a deal. The problem with FHA and VA is anything that needs to be repaired has to, if it's not a cosmetic repair, if it's a general repair, it needs to be repaired before closing. I cannot just do a concession if the AC is not running cold. I can't do a concession if the roof they found a leak in the roof and I'll just give you $5,000 and you take care of it. Whatever it is, I can't do that with FHA. I can't fix polybutylene after closing with FHA. There's lots of things I can't do after FHA that I can do conventional. I can give you a concession for it. I can't give you a concession for FHA. Okay. There's a crack in the pool. I can't just give you a concession. I've got to fix it before I can sell it. Okay. So then I go and I make those repairs, and then you can't, and then somehow the FHA deal falls apart, and now I've just spent the money and I'm not getting the closing that I thought I was. Right. So it's not as good a deal for sellers. I'll just be very blunt with you. A lot of people don't want to say that. Don't want to talk bad about government-backed loans. I don't know why, because it's just the truth. Okay. FHA, obviously, there's only 3.5% down typically. VA is typically 0 down. That's awesome for buyers. Doesn't really help the seller. Okay. But it's great. I mean, if that's the best deal you have, then take it. So FHA and VA, if you are going to switch to an FHA or VA and they've already agreed to a conventional, then you do need to have the FHA VA addendum signed. What if they switch from a cash to a financing. Do you need anything signed for that? Obviously, right? Because you don't have a contingency. What about the other way around? What if you go from a financing deal to a cash deal? If you got them to agree.
Proof of funds?
Pardon me?
Wouldn't you have to at least submit a proof of funds?
Yeah, they may require that, but no, because they gave you a contingency on your financing. Doesn't matter. You can switch to cash, and you just can't back out because you've stopped talking to your lender. So you can still close, you can still do anything. It really doesn't matter to the seller at all, except if they're staying up with your lender's going to say, I haven't talked to Vivian in a while. And they're going to say, oh no. So you need to let them know, say, we're going to close cash. We're going to waive our financing contingency. Okay. So that's what they need. That's what you need to let them know. If you want to do it in an addendum, you can, but there's no real reason to. You just need to let them know that we're waiving our financing contingency. Okay. In writing. So you can always waive it later. This is a right that they've agreed to on the contract. You can say no. You could cancel a concession if you want. They said, we'll give you a 3% concession. You say, oh, we don't need that. They can waive that too, right? They'd want an addendum for that. But for this, typically you can do an addendum. Usually you just let them know we're waiving that. They decided to pay cash for it. And that's typically going to be an investment deal where they thought they were going to get financing and they didn't need it or whatever it was. All right. Typically this is going to be fixed. I'm just doing typical stuff. Let's say it's conventional, fixed. Not to exceed. Some people put market here. Right now, I'd put something like 6. I might even do, this is a little bit of a trick to do like a 5.5, whatever. Typically, it's going to be whatever they were approved for in their pre-approval. But you can make it a little bit lower, something like that you want. Sometimes get away with that. That can help your buyer in the end. But as a seller's listing agent, you want to make sure this says either market or it says what it says on their loan approval, the pre-approval, which is what I would like to see here. I am telling you as a listing agent to accept only what's on their pre-approval. Okay. For a term of 30 years, typically you're going to just fill that in. I don't like blanks. And then this 5, let's do 5. We'll make sure they're moving on with this thing. All right. And then we're going to get down to here. Those are all financing things. Do not sneak 1,000 things in here when you're the buyer's agent. If you're trying to get a 3% concession here, we've talked about this several times before. Don't put a bunch of words in here that come out really small by the time you get done with them. 3% toward buyer's closing costs, prepaids, all that stuff gets really small in this form, and it will sometimes trick someone into agreeing to that, and that causes problems later. If not, it makes you look like you're trying to trick them into it. You can put here, you can put what's on your buyer brokerage agreement. This is your $350 transaction fee, $399, whatever your transaction fee is. You can put that stuff there for your buyer. I don't mind seeing it here as well as on the buyer brokerage agreement, but now that we have it on the buyer brokerage agreement, you don't really need to put it there. But you can if you want, because they owe it to you either way. It is not a double thing if they do that. Yeah, somebody just try to sneak things in there. Absolutely. And a lot of, they'll try to sneak it on you. A lot of times they'll try to sneak on your client, their transaction fee and stuff like that. So be careful for that. Protect your clients. If you're the listing agent, if you're the buyer's agent, don't try shady stuff like that. All right. Typically, this is what we're going to see in this area. Some of you guys down in South Florida see different things. If you come from a different state, you see the buyers pay for a lot of that stuff. Honestly, buyer paying for title insurance makes more sense than the seller paying for it. But if you tell me you're going to sell something and you want to insure it, that's great. I appreciate that. But that's what we do here. It's pretty standard for the seller to do that. If you are receiving a contract and it says the buyer shall designate, be careful with that. It could just be somebody from another area. I've had people from Miami send contracts that say that. Or people used to dealing in other states will send contracts that say buyers will pay for it, of course. That's what we do. You see that different things done different ways. But when a buyer wants to designate the closing agent and pay for it for no particular reason, a lot of times that buyer will be an attorney who's going to do their own, or they have an attorney. A lot of times it's someone with a lot of resources that has an attorney. Sometimes it's somebody who wants to flip and they want to make sure that they are controlling that deposit. And that's what I don't like. That's what I don't like about this. If it's a standard deal, I want to know why. If somebody does this, I want to know why. Why is the buyer choosing the title company wanting to pay an extra? Title insurance is about an extra $700 for every 100,000. So if I buy a house for for 500,000, it's going to be about $3,500, somewhere between $3,000 and $3,500. Why is someone so anxious to pay that? I'm concerned about that. I want to know. Okay. So I'm not particularly trusting. This is maybe just a personal thing for me, but I'm not particularly trusting of people who want to do that. I have seen people do this and try to have the, and I've seen them sometimes be successful, having the title company release their money to them before they should have, et cetera. And then you've got a whole nother fight on your hands with the title company. So just be very careful about that. Home warranty. Mostly you're seeing this right now in a real buyer's market. You'll see the seller pay for these. Okay. Typically not. Obviously, you never really see the buyer pay for it because it doesn't need to be on the contract if the buyer's paying for it. But there you go. Typically, what you're going to see right now is an NA. Just make sure. Just read if when you're receiving an as is, make sure you go over every line and make sure you're not getting stuck with something here with some warranty company not to exceed $700 or whatever it is. Let's go down here. This is boilerplate stuff. Inspection. Here we go. Property inspections, the right to cancel. Buyers have 15 days, whatever it is. Typically, you're going to see 7 or 10 right now, but 15 days is what you get if they don't fill it in. So you guys make sure you're filling this in. Right now, the market is slow enough where we don't see inspectors having any problem getting out within the next day or two. You'll have your report within 3 or 4 days. So 7 or 10 should be perfectly fine. If you're on the listing side, I'd like to see a 7, maybe a 10. So you can move on with this thing. But let's say they're going to get 7 days here. That's perfectly fine. To answer your question, you absolutely can back out for any reason whatsoever during the inspection period. It is an as-is contract, meaning nothing is forced to be in. Somebody just asked about the standard. Nothing is forced to be done. So when your seller says, your seller has a buyer, okay, and the buyer goes in and they 5 days after putting it under contract, they're like, oh, we want to get this fixed and that fixed, right? We send you a repair addendum. That's fine, but they're not entitled to that. We can. So when your seller says, I thought this wasn't as is, I'm not doing. Say that's fine. It wasn't as is. We're not forced to do anything. We can tell them no. But that's the difference between this and the standard. The standard, you cannot tell them no under a certain amount, which we'll talk about in a minute. But with this, the buyer can back out for any reason during 7 days. They can eat a bad bowl of soup and decide they're not ready to buy anything. They can do whatever. Their dog can get sick. They can. There's any reason whatsoever. It doesn't have to be house related. They do not have to get an inspection. If they do not get an inspection, though, you're going to let them know in writing you recommend an inspection. I don't care if they're a builder. I don't care who they are. Let them know in writing you recommend an inspection. Okay. So that's what this is for. So your buyer, let them know they can back out for any reason whatsoever. One of the problems we've had before is buyers, especially when it was a huge seller's market, 3-4 years ago, buyers would try to buy 3 houses at once and they'd back out of 2 of them if they got all 3, right? Because they were so hard to find a house, so they were putting in several offers at a time. That is unethical on the agent's part. Buyers should know better. It's unethical on the buyer's part, but they probably don't know better. But that's why they have professionals involved. That's part of your value, is to let them know, look, we are not, that's not ethical to do that, because we've promised to buy 3 different people's property. And what now? We're just not going to, if everybody signs our contract, agreed to our prices, which typically they're not, they're going to try to negotiate. But we had people backing out of deals for no reason whatsoever. You would see it on the forums, on social media. People are putting me under contract and backing out. It's because they were putting lots of people under contract and backing out. So just be wary of that when you're doing it. We're not in that market right now, though. Nobody's doing that right now. Okay. Escrow agent. Let's scroll down here to the things that we actually control. Again, these are written by the Florida Association of Realtors and the Florida Bar. That's why they're called FAR bar contracts. They are made where any licensed monkey can fill them out. So that's what we do. And you don't need to put legalese on here. You don't need to do anything else. You just fill in the blanks, and that's what I'm trying to teach you, how to do that. And it's different for every deal that you want to do. And if you guys ever need somebody you never need me to look over for you, let me know. I'll be happy to. But I have to know, don't just send me a contract like you guys have done before. You send me a contract. How does this look? It doesn't look anything to me. I need to know what your client needs. Like I say, it looks like a legal contract. It looks fine. Or maybe you should have filled out, you need to fill this out. You need to fill that out. But what is your client trying to do? That's what I need to know so I can really help you. I can't help you unless I know what your client's trying to do. So anything that's associated, this is very important. Anything that's going to be part of this contract right now that we know is going to, now we might throw in some other things later, right? We might throw in some other disclosures and stuff later. But for right now, these are the things we know about that are coming with this. If this is a condo, if it's in a neighborhood, we're going to do a homeowner association, right? If it's a condo, we do that one. FHA VA, if we decided FHA VA, we're doing that one. Appraisal contingency, if we're throwing that in there, we're doing that one. Obviously short sale, whatever it is, right? We're doing all these. So anything that goes with this needs to be done. Let's talk about the GG real quick. This is part of the compensation things that we've talked about several times. I don't like the GG. I think it's pointless, and I think it makes us look bad if we have to use it at any point. Get an agreement beforehand or write your commission right here. Okay, write your commission right here. Seller will concede 3% to buyer's broker pursuant to the buyer's broker agreement, and we will have a compensation agreement, and that's it. We're going to get that. So you can ask for your commission here. You did not 2 years ago. You cannot do that. Now you can ask for your commission here because it's not in the MLS anymore. We agreed as realtors that we would accept what the MLS offer of compensation. So we would not negotiate that. If they gave you 2.25 on the MLS, you couldn't ask for 3% here. But now you can ask for whatever's on your buyer brokerage agreement right here. Okay. And we negotiated as part of the contract because your buyer legally owes you that money, legally owes your broker that money for you. So because the buyer legally owes your broker that money, you can argue for it through the contract. It's part of the deal. It is no longer something that we have to talk about behind closed doors and just the MLS offer of compensation. It is whatever we talk about on this contract. It's completely negotiable, etc. I don't care if they told you by text they're offering 2%, but you want 3%, you write it here. Don't be mad when you're the listing agent and you only got your seller to agree to 2% that somebody's asking for 3%. You know why they're asking for 3%. And it says pursuant to their buyer brokerage agreement. That means their buyer brokerage agreement says that. They don't write it here if it doesn't. If you agree to 2.5% of your buyer brokerage agreement, don't ask for 3 here. That is not legal or ethical. So it is fraud actually, because you're misrepresenting your agreement you have with your client. So make sure you put whatever's on your agreement here, and that's what you'll do. Now, if you agreed to 3%, you can go lower, just like the agreement says you can. So if your buyer agreed to 3%, the seller's offering 2.5%, and you're okay with that, and you just want to memorialize in this contract that you're getting, you want to secure it in this contract that you're getting 2.5%, you can do that as well. The seller will compensate buyer's broker 2.5%. That's it. Okay, that's all you have to write in. If you want to do seller's broker, buyer, they say, look, yeah, I've got one. We're offering 3%. And, we did 6 and 3 or whatever they want to tell you. They don't have to tell you that, but they have to tell you what they're offering. Then you can do that here. Seller's broker will pay buyer's broker 3%. If you already have a compensation agreement, which you should, if you've been talking to the listing broker, you should have a compensation agreement. If you can't get one, they didn't respond to you, whatever it is, then write it here. If you have one already, you don't need to write it here. You already have a compensation agreement. Okay. So I'm not saying write it every contract here. Only write it here if you don't have a compensation agreement. Do not use the GG. The GG only says, you can. If somebody wants to use it with you, it's fine, I guess. I don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is partly the aesthetics of it. It's all that agreement says is that we're going to come to an agreement on our commission in the next 3 days, or the buyer can back out of this contract. So if the buyer has to back out of the contract because we can't agree on 2.5 or 3%, it makes us look bad. I don't like that. I would just say, let's put it right here. Let's be upfront about it. You want to be upfront about it? NAR says you should be upfront about it. Let's write it in the contract. It is part of the agreement now. And so I don't like that. That says my buyer, if I ever have to use that, my buyer has to back out of a deal because you and I are arguing over something. It's really the seller, and they're arguing over it, but it looks like it's you and I arguing, right? Because it's compensation. I don't like that at all. I would not recommend that for you, for your business, either for your client or your reputation in the business. Just be straight up and put whatever here. And if they don't like it, have them call me. And this has already happened. So don't worry about it. Sometimes they don't like it in the thing. And because they've been trained old school, the agents who have been around a while were taught this is a deadly sin to talk about commission on a contract, right? It is not anymore. They've made it everybody's business, and now it's everybody's business. It's completely negotiable. All right. It technically was before too. If you guys are using buyer brokerage agreements, like I've been training you for 11 years now to use buyer brokerage agreements. Now it's mandatory, so it's great. But now we're using it. All right, and that's it. If somebody's going to counter, if you're going to counter somebody's offer, then check this and make the changes. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to sell it, and that's it. Any other questions on this? Let's go. Let me check the chat, and we'll get to questions. Yes, people try to do that. Your thoughts on as is versus standard? Okay, that is a whole training, and I'll go over the standard soon. Some brokerages will teach you to use the standard because they're stuck in their ways. I do not like it at all. What a standard does, the difference between a standard, I'm just going to give you a brief thing, and it's all about the inspection and repairs. The standard says that the seller is obligated to fix any general repairs, not cosmetic repairs, up to 1.5% of the purchase price. Let's say you sell a house for $600,000. Okay. They are required to fix any general repairs with no discussion, nothing, up to $9,000. The seller is required to fix. That is just for generic repairs. Also, wood destroying organisms is up to $9,000. And there's another one. What's the other one? That's up to $9,000, up to 1.5%. It all says 1.5%. So 1.5% of $6,000 or $600,000 is $9,000. They could have to make up to $27,000 in repairs, forced to, right? So the buyer is forced to make an inspection. The buyer cannot back out because they had a bad bowl of soup, or because their cat died, or because their mom passed away in New York and we got to move back up there. They can't back out for any reason other than something they find on the inspection that is more than $9,000 to repair. Okay, that's the only thing they can back out for. The seller can't back out either. If the buyer finds $7,000 worth of things that need to be repaired, the seller is obligated to fix those things. Even if the buyer defaults at the end, the seller could have to sue the buyer. Okay, and if they get it, so they get the inspection, and I'm the seller and I see this inspection, I say, this inspection is garbage. This, who is this, your cousin or something? Just you'd have your dad look at it and try to make a bunch of complaints? Absolutely not. I don't agree with your inspection. I'm not making those repairs because those things aren't wrong. I have to now hire my own inspector to combat your inspection, right? So now I'm paying for an inspection. There goes $500-600. I'm paying for an inspection to combat your inspection. Obviously, we're not going to agree on everything after that. And then we have to go in together for a third inspection. We split the cost to have somebody arbitrate this thing with an inspection who says who's right and who's wrong and the repairs we have to make. At no point could the buyer or seller get out of this deal or get out of paying for more inspections. And by this time, they hate each other. As is, the sellers love it because they're not obligated to make any repairs. Sellers love as is, as you guys know. They just love the name of it because that's how you want to sell your house, just like it is right now. Buyers like it because they can back out at any point if they don't like it, or if something happens to them in that first 7, 10, 15 days, whatever their inspection period is, or if they don't like the house for whatever reason. How many times have you had a buyer put a house under contract, then they start talking about their new life and how much they're going to love it, and they go, let's go drive around that neighborhood and see what's there. And then they go two corners down and they see a drug deal and they want to back out of the contract. You guys have had them back out because of bad neighborhoods and stuff too that they didn't realize the first time until they started inspecting the neighborhood. Or then they start looking at the schools and see their schools are derated. And so you guys have had people want to back out for all kinds of reasons. It gives the buyers more flexibility. To me, it's better for the sellers. I'm not obligated to make any repairs. It is just a better contract all the way around. It is just straight business. And maybe that's what I like about it. It's logical. It's business. It makes sense for everybody. I like the house. I get to look at it first. If I don't like it, I don't have to buy it. If I do like it, but there's just a few things, I can ask you for those things. You don't have to agree to it. And I can make a decision then. It just gives so much more flexibility to both sides. So I will go over the standard later and point out some things that I really don't like about it. I love the as is. I think it's very straightforward. I think it's very fair. That's it. All right. We can talk more about that another time, though. I did a whole training one time on standard versus as is. And that was a couple of years ago, so I can do it again. Is addendum needed to change from FHA to conventional? I would do one, Gigi. Great question. I would do one, but I don't. It doesn't. It's the FHA is more restrictive. I would do an addendum to change it. Yes, I would. Tariq, yes, I can do the BBA form. No, new listing. Okay, we'll talk about that. The BBA form. Let's do the BBA form. I'm going to do the one. You'll have to excuse me. I'm going to do the one on our. Actually, let me do the one on this one. I'm going to do the one on here. Just type in buyer brokerage. Exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, transaction broker. This is the one you guys want to pick right here, okay? Do that one. We're going to buzz through this pretty well because we've covered this before pretty frequently, but I'm going to buzz through this pretty well. So now you start seeing them called consumers, which was interesting on this form, but let's just do it. Yeah, we use my nephew. And we're going to do Florida Realty Investments, all right? This is when I help my nephew buy a place. Terms of this agreement will be on the blank day, will terminate the blank day. So it's going to start today. If you're just doing it for the weekend, that's all they'll agree to, whatever. Let's try to make it a 90 days buyer brokerage agreement. Let's do whatever we can. But some people will say, look, I'll look at houses with you, but I don't want to sign any agreement. I want to see these 5 houses this weekend. Say, okay, well, let's just sign up for the weekend. So when we're going to do that, we can either sign up for the weekend or we can do a showing agreement, which is very similar to buyer brokerage agreement. A showing agreement, though, is about property. A buyer's brokerage agreement is about time. So this is the time part I'm talking about. Anything we buy during this time, hopefully it's 90 days, 180 days, whatever they'll agree to. Anything we buy during that time, I get paid for. If I have this signed with them and I show them, let's say I don't show them any houses, and then on their way home from signing this agreement, they stop at D.R. Horton and buy a house, they owe me commission for that. Okay. And they should have told D.R. Horton, and D.R. Horton should have said, well, D.R. Horton should ask them, you have anything signed with anybody? And they should say, yeah, I just signed something with Ryan the other day. And they'll say, well, he needs to register you on the site. D.R. Horton agents don't mind doing that. Sometimes they will try to not do it though. So it depends on who you talk to. And I'm talking about D.R. Horton, any builder. So make sure. But you're entitled to 3%. What happens to the poor buyer who signs this and forgets about it and goes buys that house at D.R. Horton? They owe you. These are grown people. They are adults. If they are, assuming they're adults, if they're not adults, it's not a valid contract. But if they are adults, this is a valid contract and they owe you 3%, and they should have read it better, or you should have explained it better, whatever. But you will have explained it better because you're going to go through it. They owe you no matter what, and it is their fault, and they are adults, and they're going to owe you that 3% no matter what, or whatever is on here. Okay, so that's what we do. Type of property, you're going to write in here residential, whatever it is. Location, just put residential property, Central Florida. Okay, whatever it is, whatever area you're in, the Tampa Bay area, the Orlando area, whatever, just put Central Florida. So anything they buy in that area. If they go and buy a house in Massachusetts, you're not getting paid. You're not licensed in Massachusetts anyway. It doesn't matter. Okay, but if they buy in Florida, you can just put Florida. Doesn't matter. Do a big area. What I'm telling you is to be more. Don't be specific. Don't say they're going to do it in Windermere and then they buy something in Winter Garden and you don't get paid. Okay, so just put Florida. Okay, retainer. If you guys want to do retainers, they owe you these retainers no matter what. It does not constitute a fee paid for rental information. Let me see. Earned and payable upon execution of this agreement. It's due right now. It's in addition to any compensation earned by broker. So that does, if you want to make it, otherwise you can. And that seems fair to me. It seems fair that they give me $1,000 for showing them the houses for the next month. But when I get my $25,000 commission, that $1,000 can come off of that. I think that's more fair. But if they'll agree to do it, some people do it for $500 to show you rentals all weekend. Whatever it is, that's fine. Get paid for your time. That's what you should do. Those retainers are paid to the broker, and we will turn them around for you. Okay. Purchase or exchange. So this is the real deal. This is what we're doing here. This is what they want to buy. Go ahead and do something also if they want to lease. Go ahead and do something here. I would do 100% of 1 month's rent, something like that, 50% of 1 month's rent, whatever it is you want to get paid for showing them properties if they decide to lease, especially after they decide to lease after you've been showing them purchase properties. So I would go ahead and put something in here. Just so you know, I would do 50 of 1 month's rent, right? Okay, but typically here's what we're going to do. If I want them to cover my fee, which you guys are going to do not fill out this first one, fill out the second one and do 3% plus $3.99. Sorry about that. That's my greedy broker charging $3.99. Whatever you want to do, I don't care. Make us the bad guy, but that's 3% plus $3.99. Okay, that's how you do it, or whatever your fee is. All right, additional fees, whatever you want to say there, you don't need to do that, but just the 3%. I don't know if Tariq, if that's exactly what you were asking. Do I need to mention the additional terms? No, you don't need to mention additional terms. If your buyer is going to pay you the 3%, so maybe that's what you're asking, Tariq, you can let me know that. If you're saying a buyer is going to pay you 3% no matter what, they don't want the seller to pay it, then you don't need to put it in the additional terms. You've got an agreement with them. They owe you that 3%. What we're doing in the as is or the standard contract, any contract, what we're getting is the seller to pay for that, like they've traditionally done. And they probably have on their listing agreement, 90% of the time, they're still putting that on their listing agreement. They're doing 6 total, 3 to the buyer's agent, or 5 and 2.5, whatever that number is. Typically, when I say that 3% in there, you're typically just arguing between 2.25, 2.5, and 3%. And I suggest you guys go for whatever's on this form. You can do 2.5% here. You can do 2% here. The most important thing about this is you can never collect more than what is owed here. Okay. So if you do 2.5 and the builder wants to pay you 3, you can't accept 3 unless you modify this form. If you have 3 here plus $3.99 and the builder says, guess what? That's the 3rd KB home you've sold this year. You get $5,000 bonus. Then you better have 3% plus $5,399 here. Okay, because that's how much you're going to make. So if you get that bonus, you're going to have to modify this form. There's modifications to this form. There are forms that say modification to buyer brokerage agreement. That's what you'll need to use. Okay. Please make sure you're muted if you are not talking. Conditional termination, they can do it. You put a fee in here for them driving you all over town, meeting you all over town, and you not getting a closing, or if they want to work with a different buyer, a different buyer's agent, that's perfectly fine. If you want to put $1,000 in there, I'm happy with that. $500, whatever you want to put in there from them wasting your time. And then firing you and hiring their brother-in-law who finally got his license. That's it. Okay. You can put in here, if they're going to look at new homes. If you can put in here, if seller wants to pay the buyer's broker a bonus, we'll modify this form. You can do something like that. All right. But I don't think there's any real reason to. All right. There you go. Does that answer your questions? Awesome. Any other questions on the buyer's brokers? Let me go to Jeanette. You have a question? All right. She probably took a phone call. Christina.
Hey, I'm here. Okay. I was on a phone call. Ryan, can you elaborate a little bit on the FF addenda? I had an agent that was under the impression that this was considered commission. And as I read it, and I was unable to explain to him because I didn't really understand it myself. Do you mind? It was something about like credit to buyers, commit compensation, something like that.
Yeah, this one. We did this one day. I don't remember. Credit related to buyers.
Talks about like compensation and credits, and one of the agents was like,
yeah, it is. There's a situation. I don't remember what it was currently, but buyers entered a separate broker agreement. Seller agrees to credit buyer which buyer.
I mean, do you consider this as a compensation agreement, and is it valid?
Let me look at this. I need to look at this. We did it before, and I don't remember everything that was about. In the event the credit exceeds the amount.
When you can, I'd like
more. No, okay, no, this is them. Okay, this is giving them. Okay, this is in the case. So you can only, if you have an FHA, if you have whatever conventional, you can only take so much in concession. So if I've got to give you a $20,000 roof as a seller, which is a common thing, right? I know my house needs a new roof. It's 20 years old. You're buying the house. I'm going to buy you a new roof. I can't come out of pocket and do it, or I don't want to, but I'll give you the $20,000 because I'd rather give you the money for a new roof than put on a new roof any day of the week. And I'm telling you guys that as an agent, I would rather give people money for a roof than put on a new roof, because then it's got to be done to everybody's satisfaction, and you've got this and that. I'd rather just let the buyer get their own roof and let them do it. Their insurance company will give them 30 days to do it, whatever it is. I prefer that. That is up to them though. But let's say they give them $20,000 for a roof, and then they're going to give, it's a $700,000 house, they're going to give another $21,000 for commission, right? They can't, the lender won't let them take that much. So what they're saying is they're going to do it this way. It's for the buyer's broker compensation. And if that amount exceeds how much they can take, let's say they can only take 3% or 6% of, let's say the roof was $25,000, because we can get to that 6% now. And there's a 6% maximum that I can take in concessions for my loan, then I'm going to, that's going to violate, that's going to go $4,000 over, right? Because 6% of 700,000 is $42,000. So I've just agreed for 25 and 20, I've agreed to $45,000. So I'm $3,000 over what I can take. So that's where we need to talk about what we're going to do. And this is what this does, because they won't let them take it, but they don't want the buyer to have to come out of pocket. So what this says is that if we go over the amount they can, the balance of the credit will be paid by seller directly to buyer's broker, or the credit will be reduced to the maximum amount allowed by buyer's lender. I am the agent or the buyer. I want this one checked, because that way the extra amount the seller can pay directly to Florida Realty Investments. You'll get the base amount of, in that case, $20,000, whatever it was, $17,000 at closing, and then the other $4,000 will come to you directly from the seller. Will write Florida Realty Investments a check outside of closing. That's what this does. Okay.
So it cuts your commission.
No, it doesn't. This is making sure it doesn't cut my commission.
Okay.
This is making sure it does not cut my commission, and it lets my buyer get the full amount for the roof, and they don't have to come out of pocket. The sellers agreed to this amount. Sellers agreed to 3%. They've agreed to the new roof. Seller's not going to be upset with this. This is just how it's going to be done. Is they're going to pay. There's part of it's going to come off of their HUD, and the other part they're going to write directly to Florida Realty Investments.
Okay.
For you. Okay.
Thanks.
So that's how that does. This only comes in. Don't get this form for anything. This won't be used very often. Not very often that you come into a maximum, that you hit your maximum of concessions. Sometimes you do, but not very often. If you're a busy agent doing 25 deals a year, this might happen once a year. Okay. It's not going to happen a ton. And in that case, you want to make sure that they get that. Before, we couldn't do that. So what this did, when we created the seller concession for buyer's compensation, buyer's brokerage compensation, what this did is it created a whole new strain on the amount of concessions a buyer could take. And so that was limiting them, and it was hurting sales. It was hurting real estate. And so they did this form to where, look, you can still be paid outside of closing now. All right. And the seller can agree to it here, because the seller has agreed to the $25,000. The seller has agreed to the $21,000, which puts us at $46,000. You could only take $42,000. And so now that $4,000 is hanging out there. And previously it would have just been money my buyer couldn't get. And I probably would have taken the hit as the agent, right? Or at least split it with him or whatever. And now I don't have to, using this form, but it doesn't come into play very often. But that's what this form was. Now I'm refreshed on this. And we went over it one time when it first came out, but that's what it's for. Any questions on that? Christina, you have a question we'll go to.
Yeah, it's funny. That deal that I'm closing now with that ERA Grizzard agent, that's the form that they sent over for just as their compensation. You know, we were offering, and you and I talked about it. What we ended up doing was just, you know, the compensation form, because, you know, on my agreement, I have that the seller is paying us and then we're paying the buyer's agent. But it was just interesting because she's like, oh yeah, we only use this form and nobody does what you're doing. Nobody does that anymore. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure some people are still doing that. They
literally just came out with a new form for the other one that takes both. Remember, because we originally had the seller to buyer's broker and then the seller's broker to buyer's broker. They just made one form that came out after this. They made one form for that. So everybody's using that one because you don't know how this is going. Right?
Oh yeah, she was like, you know, she was just telling me like, oh yeah, nobody does that. Everybody does, because you have to decouple. You have to do it the other way. And I'm like, no, you don't. No, but you know that we have to do.
This says seller agrees to credit buyer, the sum described below. This is not seller's broker doing it. So if you have a traditional, like most of you are still doing your listing agreements, it's 6 and 3 or 5 and 2.5, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's not the seller crediting. That's the seller's broker crediting the buyer's broker. And so that form will come into play.
Yeah, it was interesting because she just was like, "Oh, nobody does it, though. You know, the way that we're doing it, where the seller pays us, and nobody's like, nobody does
Yeah.
that anymore." And I'm like, I think they still do.
Yeah, Chad says it's three for conventional and 6 for FHA. I thought one of them's 9. I thought now, maybe I'm mistaken on that. I thought one of them is 9 now. But anyway, you can take a lot of concession, but you can't take too much without doing this. And that's only so. But if my seller gives me, just to be clear, if the seller gives me $20,000 toward a roof on a $700,000 home, that's less than 3%. They give me $20,000 toward a roof, and then their seller's broker is paying buyer's broker. That's not a concession. Okay, so that's just that's commission. So this doesn't come into play then. And only if they're having to make the concession because they told their agent, no, I'm not paying any buyers. I'll negotiate it when I get an offer, whatever. They can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's when this comes into play.
She said that's the only form that she uses all the time. And and we ultimately did, the compensation form, seller's broker to buyer's broker, and didn't ratify that one because if they're signing that and there's also a compensation being offered, isn't that potentially obligating them to two?
Yeah, no, but that's not going to hold up in court.
But
it's not going to hold up in court. But yes, it would be a pain in the butt if somebody wanted to push them on it. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say was just that I'm seeing, if you guys are going to go show new homes, make sure, even if you're meeting them in front of the model and having them sign right there, have them sign that comp agreement there, because what these builders are doing is asking for, hey, they're not entitled to it, but they are asking for the compensation agreement when you ratify the contract. So if you don't have it signed yet, if you have it signed after that date, I can just see them, trying to fight that. So I just wanted to make you guys aware. I've experienced that. I've seen a lot of other agents.
Yep. So we haven't had them fight it yet. I see them asking people for it. Different builders. It's not all of them. It's certain builders. I haven't really even determined which ones yet. Maybe you guys could tell me. Certain ones are asking for it. And I've been telling you guys they're not entitled to it, but give it to them. Who cares? It's not it's right. Between you and your buyer. But as long as your buyer's trying to buy the house, so you're going to cooperate with them buying the house. You're not going to say no, I'm not showing you that, and throw the whole deal away. Then your buyer has to pay you out of their pocket outside of buying the house. So you're going to cooperate to help your buyer. But no, they're not legally entitled to it. They want to see it just to try to get out of paying you. So cooperate with them and show it to them so you don't have to fight that battle. But yeah, you're right. I've seen a lot of agents have texted me or emailed me and said, should I show them this? They're asking for this. It's not their business, is it? No, it's not. It's nobody's business but you and Florida Realty Investments and the client. Or the consumer in this case. Yeah. It's not their business, but they're a lot of them are going to ask for it. And you know what? It is the old 800-pound gorilla rule.
Right.
You're going to fight them on it. The 800-pound gorilla doesn't have to live by the rules. They do what they want.
Yeah, I think it's just, mine was, I didn't have a problem because I had mine signed and the rep was very nice, but mine was D.R. Horton. My friend just experienced it at KB. Nobody has, we haven't had any problems because we've had ours signed. But exactly like what you're saying, it does beg the question: if somebody had it post-dated, is that going to be a fight for the commission? I just don't know.
Yeah, post-dated it would be. Yeah, because you legally should have had it when you showed it. Patricia asked in the chat related to that: do we have to ask the buyer agreement before they show up? I said, absolutely not. You assume that your colleagues in this industry are doing their job. You assume they're following the rules and ethics just like we do on any other part of the business. You don't have to see it. It's none of your business, honestly, what's on their buyer brokerage agreement until they start complaining about how much commission is offered. Even if you're offering 3% and their buyer brokerage agreement only said 2.5%, they don't have to tell you that. And you guys remember that when you're on the buyer brokerage side, you don't have to tell anybody that. You can get it modified and say, hey, look, they're going to give me 3%. You guys cool with that? Sure, I don't care. Right? So that's what they're going to do. Christina, or I'm sorry, Tammy.
So, oh my gosh, did my mind go blank? I have a deal right now. Okay, I have a deal. It was a expired listing. So I reached out to the owner and we're gonna you know, I've written up an offer, we're going to have a deal. So there's no MLS printout except the expired listing. So I couldn't really provide the printout for our pipeline. That's number one. And number two, the owner, she owns it outright. So, and then my seller, gosh, I'm like, oh, my buyer has a house on the market and it's free and clear and they can't sell it. And it's over on the other side of the state. And so the seller owns her property free and clear. So she offered, I'm just wondering what you would think this means. She offered to do a bridge loan, which my interpretation of a bridge loan would be the buyer taking out a loan on their existing home to purchase this home. But what do you think that she would mean by a bridge loan, or do you think that she's meaning hold the mortgage?
She's going to hold the mortgage for a little bit. She's going to collect money from them. She's going to bridge until they can sell that house. So she's going to sell her finance it for 6 to 12 months, whatever.
Yeah, so we would actually close on it. And then the title company, does the title company draw up a mortgage?
Attorney or title company will, yeah. If you ask them to, you're going to pay an attorney to do it. You need a note and mortgage. Well, she'll need that. Are you representing the seller or the buyer?
Well, she has no representation, the seller. So I'm kind of working back and forth.
So you're representing the buyer. So you're representing the buyer. Okay, yeah. And yeah, you said it's off market. Yeah. Yeah, the buyer and seller are both protected by a note and mortgage. So get the note and mortgage. The mortgage is what gives them the property. The note lets them collect if they don't pay. So everybody's protected by a note and mortgage. So have an attorney do it.
Okay.
And you don't want any part of that.
No. So we'll close on it and she'll hold the mortgage and they'll own the house and then
they'll move into the house. They'll do everything it'll be their house. And they'll
when a seller is holding the mortgage and they pay it off, how does that get satisfied?
They're either going to give her all the money, in which case they satisfy the promissory note, right? And it's done. The mortgage is ripped up and they satisfy the promissory note. At some point they're giving the money either through a loan or through cash.
But who records that they've paid it off,
they'll do it through the county.
Okay. So they're
the attorney, that same attorney will draw up a thing saying it's satisfied and they'll.
Oh, okay. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. It's a satisfaction of mortgage. It's perfectly fine. Same as if you pay off your mortgage.
Okay. I just didn't know which part, who handled that, but the attorney does. Okay.
Yeah, I would suggest that you also consider on the terms and conditions, deadlines and timelines, and also covering your taxes, insurance, and utilities, which can all come back to haunt that seller who's financing.
But if I'm not really representing her, is that really my problem?
No, that's something the attorney should deal with her, and you don't want to give legal advice, but yes, that's it. When you do have a seller in that situation, you definitely want to.
Like if you help me with my house and we do this, I want.
Which I totally forgot to get in touch with you. I'm so sorry. Just
no, it's okay. We'll get it.
Any other questions on any of the forms we've done? Any other form requests? Yes, Anne.
Yes, I have a different question in regard to my listing. Is it okay? I have a listing in Cocoa, and I think the Cocoa people may not have the access to the MLS here. That's why nobody called. So do I have any other option that I can list over there?
Great question. Call their board and they will either sign you up as a secondary member, and I think that's $100 a quarter or something like that. It's not bad. $100 every 90 days. Or well, first of all, I think a lot of Space Coast, that's called Space Coast Association of Realtors, Space Coast MLS. It's a little different. It's a flex MLS. It's a different system. It's a little confusing. You can join their board, or they may put it in for you for a flat fee. And that gets everybody. Most Brevard agents, Brevard County, that's where that is, for those of you who don't know. Most agents are part of Stellar too. They join Orlando as secondary, or they join Orlando as primary, and then they join theirs as secondary because it's a little cheaper that way, I think. But so most of them are seeing it, but you'll get more people will see it if you put it in their MLS.
Okay.
For sure. So contact their board, ask them if they'll put it in for you. So if you're a realtor in the state, a lot of boards will put, let's say you have a listing in Jacksonville. I know I use Jacksonville for an example because I know they'll do it. If you get a listing in Jacksonville and you don't want to refer it, that board will list it for you for a couple $100. Like it used to be 180. I don't want to promote that anymore because that was 3 or 4 years ago. It's probably a lot more now. Only if you're a realtor in the state of Florida. So if you're a part of FAR, they will list it for you, a property. So a seller couldn't just call the board and have them list their property. You have to be a realtor and they'll do it for you.
I have a listing 270 in Cocoa. It's a nice house. If anybody want information, please let me know. I put the address on the chat.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
You bet. Patricia, we're going to get to your, I did this delayed listing thing a couple of weeks ago. We talked about it, but I'm going to do it again. We'll talk about it. Let's talk about it next week. I can talk to you about it personally, but on the forum, we'll talk about it again next week. Let's do that. But you have another question, go ahead. Okay. Maybe that was your question. Any other questions or comments? Any other forms you guys want to see? Oh, your volume's not working. Okay. Any other forms you want to see? Anybody? Eric, you have a question?
Yeah. Hey, Ryan. Yeah, Eric Vasquez. I don't have any questions, but I figured before the conclusion of the chat, I'll just do a shameless plug. Commercial real estate broker on the team. So if anyone has any clients that they would like to refer, any type of commercial, say they are buying a home, but they also need to move their office or looking to purchase commercial property, feel free to reach out to me, Eric Vasquez. And also I do some business development for a construction company that does build outs for restaurants. So any questions on restaurants, construction, and also anything all commercial, Eric Vasquez. So
Eric, put that in our Facebook group too. I appreciate you sharing that.
Will do. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, because people will, you guys know you can search that. Like if you see something in our Facebook group and then you forget what it was, or, Eric's going to put that in here. And if 6 months from now, you forgot who it was that put that thing about the restaurants, you can search on a Facebook group page. So you can search for stuff. And you can say, if you search for restaurant, it might be a couple of posts that mention restaurants along the way, but Eric's will be on there. So if you search for like surveyors, people have asked for surveyors, people have asked for appraisers, people have asked for all that, and you don't remember it, instead of asking again, which you can do, I don't mind you asking again, but you can also search and find old ones where people have recommended people. That'll get you a little bit more. You can do both of those things. It's perfectly fine with me. So thank you, Eric. Thanks for sharing. Any other questions or comments? Any other forms that you guys want to see? All right. Well, that is it then. Next week, we have Jim Kennedy from Safe Home Inspections coming in. He's going to do something for us, and then we're going to talk about this delayed listings, and we're going to talk about a few other things. You guys have anything else for me today? All right. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you coming out, and we'll see you next week. Bye. Oh, Maima, flood disclosure. They're due on every paper, every deal. They're very simple to go over. I can do that for you. It's just, you fill it out. It says, have you had any flooding? A flooding is not when the roof leaks and water comes in. A flooding is not when the sink pipes bust, the toilet overflows. None of that is flooding. Flooding has to be from outside, from rain or a riverbank overflowing or whatever, a lake overflowing. Flooding has to be from God. It can't be from, and not from God through your roof. It has to be from the ground. Flooding has to be. So if you've had people say, oh, my bathroom was flooded. Your bathroom was flooded because your toilet overran or your tub overfilled. It wasn't flooded. But if water has breached the slab, then yes, you've had flooding. If you've had to report it to your insurance, or you've had FEMA, or you've had any kind of flooding whatsoever, you need to disclose it on the flood disclosure form, which is just emailed to the buyer to done that. But it's supposed to be done with every contract. So have it done with every contract. All right. You can put that, and if you have a listing, you should have it on as an attachment so people can send it back to you, because they don't know for sure. They're going to put no flooding on your disclosure form, but you need to do it from the seller. Okay.
I'm going to peel off the thing. So that goes like this. Oh, nice.
Yolanda, are you talking to me?
No, thank you.
All right. I didn't think so. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. Have a great day. I will see you guys next week. And if you need anything in the meantime, let me know. Bye, everybody.